Alright guys, so we're going to go over Boxplots now. Since we've already done the 5-number summary, we should be able to get through this pretty easily now since we know how to calculate that. And now we just need to design a box plot. So with this, we're just going to go with this set of data right here that we have in front of us here. And we're going to go ahead and set up with our 5-number summary so we know what we're looking at. So we need to set up and understand what our min value is. We need to find out what our Q1 value is. We need to find out what our median is. Pen's acting crazy. And need to find out what our Q3 is. Also, sorry, back at the end, then we also need to find out our max. So with these values then, by looking at these, since they're already in order for us, we can determine that our min is a 1. So our min value right here. And we determine that our max is a 45. Alright. Now, let's see how many numbers we have here. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. We have 16 numbers. So with that, we should have 8 in our lower half and 8 in our upper half. So we should have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So we're going to draw a line right here. We know we got 8 down here and 8 up there. So to find our median, we would simply need to add these two guys up and divide by 2. Well, 3 plus 3 divided by 2 is simply going to give us 3. So we know we have a 3 for a median. Now, since we also have 8 values in our lower half and in our upper half, let's go ahead and see what two numbers we need to average together to figure out what our Q1 and our Q3 are. So we should be able to take this at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the 4th and 5th number we should be able to determine right here to see what our actual Q1 is. Well, 2 plus 2 divided by 2 is going to be 2. Alright. And then if we go ahead and take, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, oh sorry, 1, 2, I counted too fast. 1, 2, 3, 4. Alright, and then the 5th one. So then these two. So we should have a 5 and a 5. And so we should get our Q3 is a 5. Okay, so now that we've developed our 5-number summary here, let's go ahead and find out what our IQR is. So our IQR is our interquartile range. And hopefully you guys remember that's simply taking your Q3 minus your Q1. So we are simply taking 5 minus 2, which will give us 3. Okay? So the reason why we need IQR is, so therefore we can determine, that'll help us in the equation to determine our fences. As far as what say fences is, that determines what is going to be considered an outlier. If it's outside of those fences, then therefore it will be classified as an outlier. So outliers are determined by the equations. So outliers are determined by the equations as far as with your lower bound fence, as far as saying Q1 minus 1.5 times your IQR. Okay, and again, that is going to be calculate your lower bound, right? So I'm just going to say lower bound. Okay, and for your upper bound fence, we're going to have this. We're simply going to take Q3, and we're going to add 1.5 times the IQR. Alright, so for this, On the lower bound, we're simply taking Q1, which we had was 2, subtracting 1.5 times our IQR of 3, and determining what our lower bound is. Alright, so with this, let's go ahead and open up the calculator here. So we had 2 minus 1.5 times 3, correct? Yes. Make sure I put it in there, right? Okay, so this should give us a negative 2.5. So negative 2.5. So we don't have any negative values in our data plot up here, so therefore there are no lower values that would be considered outliers. Well, let's check out these outliers on the high end here for our upper bound, because 13 possibly, but 45 definitely is pretty high up there. So let's see how that plays out for this one. So we're simply going to take our Q3, which was 5, add 1.5 times our IQR of 3. Alright, so if we take 5 plus 1.5 times 3, 9.5. So 9.5 is our upper bound fence, okay? So again, this is the upper bound fence. And the negative 2.5 was our lower bound fence. So in other words, what it's saying is anything less than negative 2.5 would be considered an outlier, and anything above 9.5 would be considered an outlier. So right off the bat, we already see that 13 and 45 are outliers. Now, the reason you have to determine those values is because that comes into play when you're drawing your box plot. So now that we have our values here for min, Q1, median, Q3, our max, and now that we know which values are considered outliers, we can draw the proper box plot for this, okay? So with that, okay, so I'm going to start out here and simply say our lowest value was, we'll start with 1. And you need to scale this properly when you're drawing your box plot. So we'll do it as best we can, because I know we got some high outliers. I'm not going to be able to fit all 45 dashes here. So we're going to make this somewhat nice so it's legibly, and makes a little bit better sense. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10. Alright, and then I'm just going to say, since we got going in here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, let's put 5 there. And then 6, 7, 8. And then the reason why I'm labeling those is because we know for this, our minimum value was a 1. And for a box plot, we're going to draw a line like that, okay? Now, we know for our Q1, that was labeled as a 2. So I'm going to draw another line right here on 2, just like this. Okay, we know that our median was a 3. So we'll draw another line right there for a 3. We know our Q3 was at 5. So at 5, I'm going to label that one right here at 5. Draw another line. And then the highest value before we got to outliers was an 8. So therefore, then we've got our 8. Now, our Q1, median, and Q3 are enclosed in this rectangular box because that accounts for 50% of the data from the data we have, okay? And then from our min to our Q1, just draw a line to connect that, and then from our Q3 to our max, draw a line to connect that. Now, to handle these outliers, so at 9, 10, 10, and then we had going up to 13, and then I'm going to say not dot because it's a pretty good ways out here, but I'm going to label this one just out here and say this is 45. So I don't think we have enough room to draw all those dashes. And with that, an outlier is simply notated as solid dot. So we had our first outlier at 13 and our second outlier at 45. Alright, so again, we have our min at 1, those are connected to our Q1, our median, Q3, and our max, and then our 2 outliers. And that is how that will always be done for drawing a box plot. Alright, hope that makes sense. See you guys next time.